Okay, so I'm calling today's meeting to order at 9:02 on Friday, September 22nd. Thank you all for attending. We have committee members joining remotely via video conference. Also to the public viewing, thanks for joining. Emily, could we please have a roll call to confirm a quorum is present?
Certainly. Chris Pushkarsh. Diane Monroe. Present. Steve Hunt.
Here.
Art Lucy.
Here. And
Joe Martens.
Here. So I'm substituting for Chris today as chair, who couldn't make it, unfortunately. An agenda was included with the committee materials. Please note that this committee meeting is being recorded. A link to the video and transcription will be posted on the Olympic Authority website following the meeting. Committee members, please speak clearly as possible and identify yourself each time you speak or make a motion. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes. May I have a motion approving the minutes of our last meeting held on June 14th, 2023?
So moved, Art Lucy.
Thank you, Art.
Second, Diane Monroe.
Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. I just saw a note. Someone's on WebEx. Came up next to Steve. Was that possibly Chris?
No, that's just a recording
Oh.
and broadcast.
Oh, thanks.
Mike, WebEx indication was just our recording.
Oh, yes, the other video. Yes. Oh, thank you.
Great, thanks. The next item is the amendment to the background check policy and proposed resolution 509. Adam, could you provide us some background regarding this item?
Sure, yeah. Good morning. There were some minor changes made throughout the policy itself, but the most substantive changes were to the sections under category 1, where we expanded on what would be considered a new candidate that is coded to tech or IT. We expanded on what those job responsibilities would include because some new candidates might not necessarily be coded to tech, but still be within the IT department. And so we just wanted to, expand on that definition of what those job responsibilities would include for a new candidate under the category 1 covered position. We also added.
No, I'm not, it's not easy for me to hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you need me to repeat anything?
No, I'm just,
I'll speak up. I
I
apologize.
was thinking about Steve.
Sure. And then we also expanded under category 1 covered positions that would include essentially anyone within the financial department, someone who handles financial data, financial systems, access to financial data, including physical currency such as petty cash, cash registers. Any candidate that would have those job responsibilities under a covered position under category 1 was also added to the policy. This also included anyone who would have access to personal, private, sensitive information such as social security card or social security numbers, financial data, health-related information, medical records, things like that. So that would be more under someone in HR, essentially. The other changes, minor changes that were made to the policy included under category 2, which is those positions that fall under our agreements with our insurance provider, that we wanted to make clear that any candidate under the age of 18 that's being brought on as a candidate under a covered position in category 2 would also be subject to a full background check and then follow-up background checks every 3 years thereafter. So we just want to make that clear that that included minors. And then the last change really had to do with making a clarification to what would be required under full background checks for category 3 covered positions. Category 3 covered positions are those that are required or need to undergo a background check under our agreement with the USOPC and Safe Sport. So for a category 3 covered position, on the initial appointment, they undergo a full background check, and that also includes, and this is the addition, that also includes a Safe Sport disciplinary record search. That is done on initial employment, and then basically every year thereafter. There's a supplemental background check that is done on year 2, year 4, year 6, that would also include the Safe Sport disciplinary record search. So basically every year they have to undergo that requirement. And that's done through our HR staff. The TPA that we have is not responsible for that. Our HR staff are responsible for searching the Safe Sport disciplinary records. And we included a link to that in the policy. And those were the majority of the changes.
Questions?
I mean, it all makes sense. My question is have there been any changes in the rules and laws, or are we just making sure we're
Nope, no,
for due diligence to make sure we're doing it the best we can?
Right.
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as time has gone on and we've had people come on and we look at the background check policy, there have been some things that just were overlooked when the.
And we've grown and makes perfect sense.
Can you talk about, is there any such thing as grandfathered positions or people who've been here for a certain length of time that we never did background checks on, but now might need to?
So, well, as the policy is currently written, it's really just for new hires and if there's a promotion, say if someone was currently employed and they get promoted to one of these positions, then they would have to undergo a background check. We aren't currently doing background checks on, well, let me rephrase that. Those employees such as ski patrol or anyone that's under category 3 or category 2 that have to do, every 3 years or every other year, supplemental background checks, they are background checked, current employees or new candidates. But for category 1 covered positions where really it's just, a full background check and credit history check for those applicable positions. If they're a current employee, they haven't undergone that process. It's just for new hires.
Okay.
Essentially.
How does it work with I'll take cashiers, for example, who work part-time or they
Hourly employees would be included. That's why we kind of wanted to create the catch-all language for under the new additions that we made so that it was clear. Anybody that is handling such like petty cash or cash registers, any kind of physical currency is going to be subject to a background check under category 1.
This is a little bit off track, but I can tell you that some hotel businesses have gone to credit card only to avoid handling of petty cash. And it's something I don't know if we're ready to do that yet, or if there has been challenges if that's even legal to do. But I just say from our experience, that's where there's pretty heavy movement.
Well, we've seen a dramatic growth in our e-commerce utilization over the last few years. I mean, it's just astounding. And obviously all that is credit card and electronic takes away the risk of handling the cash, then creates the other risks of the cybersecurity and everything else that we have to do. Unfortunately, we've got a great team doing that too.
Thank you.
And obviously the concern is not just cash, it's people that look at sensitive information, whether it's social security numbers and personal information. So it really is intended to catch everybody in the process who may have a background that would impact their ability to, maintain privacy, integrity as far as the money flow goes internal to the organization. So it seems like we've captured everybody at this point that we need to capture with this change in policy. So it seems like we're very up to date, which is great. If there's no further questions, I'll ask for a motion to recommend that the Board of Directors adopt proposed resolution 509 as presented. Can I have a motion? By
Diane.
Diane.
Second, Art.
By Art. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Next item on the agenda is a discussion of the evaluation process for the president and CEO. So I'd say throughout the search process, we had many discussions, not only about candidates, but about the process for evaluating candidates, or evaluating the person who was ultimately appointed. And I think we all agreed that an annual evaluation process, and in this case with a new CEO, that it was important to have evaluations even more frequently, probably at the mid-year point. But, we realize that any new person is going to need guidance, help, and we also want to make sure, one, they're successful, but two, that they're meeting the expectations of the board, meeting their own expectations. So we wanted to just have at least start the discussion now about what that evaluation process would look like. Diane was kind enough to provide sort of a very brief outline of a process she had been through before, and it's not intended to be the be all end all. It was intended to provoke, some discussion, and that was included in the package for the governance committee. So I'll stop there, and maybe Diane, you want to talk about some of the
So
figures that.
I actually played with it a little more since because I realized I had a category missing. So basically for the review process, you need to make sure you've got some certain fundamentals in your structure. One would be, what are the goal areas? What, every year we should have goals, our president and CEO should have goals, our leaders within the organization should have goals. So you want your goal areas. And the truth is, if we do those right, and I even added a couple possibilities, maybe something to do with sustainability, because that's an important part of who we are. Maybe something to do with employee satisfaction and retention, because that survey, really kind of got my attention as being maybe a good idea. But the second part of the structure is once the goal areas are established and the goals are established, you need measurements. The measurements could be, the survey results. It could be profit loss statement if revenue is one of the areas, growth, economic impact. That's part of our mission, right? So another would be, once we have the goal areas, another category would be, what are the measures? Then the other thing you absolutely have to have is a timeline, a clear timeline. And so, that's just kind of the broad strokes. I like a process that involves the president and CEO. If we could come up with, if we looked at this and said, well, let's clean this up, or here are some ideas, let's look at it again, my recommendation would be we then take it to Ashley and have her take a look at it and provide input. For me, and in all the different boards I've been on, and then the different experiences I've had going through this process, the first trigger is a report from the person who's being evaluated, saying, here are the goal areas, here are the measurements, here's how we've done so far, my thoughts. And then the board gets that, and then the board gets a chance to really talk it through. And then there's a single narrative written with the entire board input that would be written by Joe, and then Joe would meet with the president and CEO and go over the write-up. It's a pretty relaxed process in terms of it's conversational in nature, but it should have a backbone of measurement. Because we work together all the time, there's a relationship. So those are my thoughts, and
And obviously, the evaluation process leads into things like salary review, obviously, an annual salary review. So the evaluation will precede that, and then would be a board decision on recommending a salary.
The other thing that's really important here is that when you establish the goals for the year for the CEO, you're basically establishing the goals for the organization. And so it becomes an incredibly important process. And we as a board have to understand that we can have these goals and then something can happen that nobody expected. And that's President and CEO's, attention will shift. And maybe at the end of the year, this isn't going to be where we wanted it to be because this got fixed. Do you know what I mean? So it's a loose, tight system. It has to be.
Especially weather related.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, obviously, our goal is to generate revenue. There are some things that can happen that knock that right out of the sky for us, right? So, but how do you deal with it? So
I think there's also ways to make the categories not enough. So I think, establishing financial goals is great, but obviously we all know it's weather dependent. It's,
absolutely.
Pandemic dependent, there's all kinds of variables in the system that could impact, but it's how we react and how the leadership reacts to those situations that I think is, the most important part. So I think it does have to be relatively flexible, but it's got to demonstrate that we're doing everything we possibly can to make the organization as successful as possible.
Yep. So I don't know what the thoughts are on the next step.
So
I'd be happy to continue to work on this with whoever else wants to.
I will encourage the board at the board meeting for feedback
Okay.
on the document itself, and we'll refine the document over time. But, and then the next step will be to sit down with Ashley, get her feedback from it, finalize it, and then
And
legalize it.
my recommendation, after today, when we get to draft 2, my recommendation is you put it in front of Ashley then.
Sure.
And the sooner the better. Because
She could have input right from the start as far as I'm
Exactly.
concerned.
exactly. I think that becomes really important.
But to
Steve,
be clear, we're not taking action on that now. And I just was looking, and I don't see it in my packet, the sample there, so I may have missed it, but I didn't see it in either the board packet or the committee packet, so.
It was in the packet.
It was on the pages down. It wasn't an attachment. It was printed in the flow of the document,
The cover memo.
the memo. Because I always read it on here now. So I can actually email it to you.
well, Steve, to your point, apologize if it didn't arrive in your package. We think it was an attachment or it was part of the cover memo. But
I see
is
it
a-
now.
it's a-
I see it now. Apologies.
Okay.
Yeah, I do see it now. Yeah.
Good. So it is a draft document, and we're looking for feedback on it. It was really just to start the discussion. And I wanted everybody to understand that there would be a process for an annual evaluation process, in this case, probably twice a year, but leading towards, an annual evaluation and tied into the compensation for the following year. Art, in the meantime, while he's looking at the document, any comments or?
No.
Okay.
Fine.
So Steve, unless you have anything further, we can move on to the next agenda item. We'll talk a bit more about this, obviously, at the board meeting.
Nope, I have no questions. I'll review this before the board meeting. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Next item on the agenda is amending, I believe, Resolution 507, approving the appointment of the president and CEO and proposing resolution number 508. Michelle, a little background for us on this?
Yes, the amendment is to address 2 aspects of the first resolution. The resolution appointing Ashley had a start date of September 1st. She actually started on September 14th, so we have corrected that date in the resolution. And then the resolution also leaves placeholders for you and the board to come to a decision over her salary and other compensation in the terms of vacation time.
Great. So that leaves us, I think, with just a discussion over salary, which we did not establish when we appointed Ashley at the last meeting. The search committee did discuss salary fairly extensively. We looked at Mike's current salary, his salary history. We looked at the compensation of other executive staff at ORDA. We checked in with Albany to make sure that we were, that our line of thinking was consistent with other authorities to the extent it could be, although everyone acknowledged that ORDA is a bit unique. There's not many other authorities that have similar responsibilities around the state, but we wanted to make sure that they were comfortable with a range of salaries that we were considering. And where I think we sort of landed initially was, about $200,000 annually, which is between where Mike is now and where other executive staff, the second tier executive staff are. It's somewhat right in the middle. Ashley had requested, when we discussed this with her, to have 3 weeks vacation as opposed to the sort of typical 2-week vacation that most employees start with. And mostly that was to accommodate, she has children in school, several school vacations that she would like to be free for. And she also acknowledged that she understands completely that the job is basically a 24/7, 365 job. So even when she is on vacation, she has to be available for whatever the needs may be, and she fully understands that. So we have recommended, or I'd like to recommend to the governance committee, $195,000 starting salary with 3 weeks of vacation in the first year. Obviously subject to annual review, just as we discussed in the previous agenda item. So with that, I will open it up to discussion and some feedback.
I would just say that what do we call this, the nominating committee or the selection committee?
Selection committee.
Selection committee discussed this a lot, and I think we came to this resolution unanimously, and I would make the motion to adopt the 2 terms.
I'll second it.
Okay.
The committee spent a lot of time on this and really looked at what was wise and what was fair. And Ashley's input helped. So I think it's a good move.
Thank you, Darren. So we have a motion and a second, and obviously now we're open for further discussion. Steve, any questions?
Yeah, just a quick question. With regard to the vacation time, so does that grow over time? How does that work? Do we know? Does someone there know how that will work?
So typically it starts at 2 weeks and then would go to 3 weeks in the subsequent year with, I think, a week of
Personal time.
personal time. So that's the sort of the ordinary progression of things.
And then after, I think it's 7 years, it goes to 4 weeks.
I want to make sure that my understanding is that we're talking about year 1 only.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't envision it impacting the trajectory of other increases. It was just year 1.
Correct.
The way it works is the first year you get 2 weeks, period. When you move into the second through 6th year, you accrue 3 weeks vacation per pay period. So she'll be starting with 3 weeks for the first year. When she hits her anniversary date, then it'll be 3 weeks, but it's not 3 weeks right from the beginning. It's accrued over the year
Over the course of the year.
per pay period, yes.
Oh.
And just for clarity, so that would be in the second year that the accrual would take place.
Correct, Steve.
Okay.
All right, so you got more, Steve?
Nope, that
Okay.
was what I wanted to know. Thank
Just have a
you.
little echo, I think.
Yeah, so when you say it accrues, Ashley started September 14. Let's say there's Christmas vacation. She has built up over pay periods, her days until Christmas vacation.
Way it's gonna work is on September 14th, she has, if this goes through the process, she'll have 3 weeks vacation.
Okay, good.
She could take immediately. Right, then what happens is that September 14th of 2024, assuming that she has used all 3 weeks vacation, then she accrues vacation for the pay period. If she doesn't use all 3 weeks vacation, that will carry over, but she'll continue to accrue
Okay.
her pay period. So if you take the 3 weeks and you multiply that by 7.5 hours per day, and you break it out over 26 pay periods, you get so many hours of vacation time per pay period. So you hit year 7, then that increases to 4 years. Right?
So I'll complicate it further. So when we do annual reviews or discussions, is vacation no longer part of our review?
So this, the way I understand it and read it is we are making an accommodation for the 3 weeks in the first year, but then she goes right back to sort of the authority's policy with regard to vacation and accruals for subsequent years. I think the board can always amend that for the president and CEO. So
Yeah.
I think that, again, the expectation would be that she would accrue like everybody else in year 2. But
With the exception that she can carry over anything that she doesn't use of this first
Correct.
tranche of 3 weeks. Right, okay,
Correct.
that's how I understood it too. Thank you.
So when we talked about it, I think one of the reasons it got so complicated, right, was that we kept trying to envision a contract that we have with a president and CEO, but this organization is a little different. So it's kind of a contract, but policy driven. And I think that got confusing. So we don't really know, we didn't feel like we really knew and understood all of those policies. And that's something we might want to better understand. But the way I look at it is we may end up with a specific contract for the president and CEO. That can happen, right?
I just want to jump in and just so our terminology is correct, we do not have a contract with the president and CEO. None of our employees are contractually hired. That carries legal implications that we're not.
Okay.
So she is an at-will employee like everybody else. And you as the board decide by resolution how you're going to address her salary and compensation.
That clarification is huge.
So, but I think back to the original point, I think regular accrual, again, we can always, as the board can make a different decision with regard to Ashley or her salary and her compensation package, but accrual consistent with the rest of the organization is important because it has implications for retirement or, how you use time in subsequent years. So I think it's that part of it. I think we should be as consistent as possible with the rest of the organization. The exception, I think, comes with the annual review process and compensation. We determine what and how she should be compensated year to year.
And the
based on-
point is that Michelle makes is that's done purely by resolution.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion is carried. Thank you. So I think that concludes, and I'm losing my voice already, the business of today's governance committee meeting. Are there any other items?
Yes, for the good of the order, so we did our board review, our self-evaluation, and we had talked about the fact that we needed to delve into that a little bit more. And I'd like to get that on the agenda for our next meeting. Because I don't want it to sneak
Yep.
up on us again.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Diane. Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, Art. I have a second. I have a second.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Steve. Thank you, Steve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thanks, everybody.